Hi, everybody. Welcome to Patriots History. I am your host and the co-author of Patriots History of the United States, Larry Swikart. First of all, I just got back from the Great Homeschool Convention in Columbus, Ohio, and I was surprised and encouraged by how many of you came up and said, "Oh, we're reading along with you on your YouTube channel." It was quite amazing. I didn't think we were having that reach, but I appreciate it. Um, Second of all, if you ever want to schedule a specific Zoom meeting with some of your homeschool groups, like invite 2 or 3 families at a time, I'd be happy to give you guys an hour if you want to work on scheduling something like that. Or if you know a local, say, GOP group that wants to have me come speak and is willing to pay my travel there, I would be happy to do a side venue and give you guys a talk. I've done that down in Florida, for example. So just get in touch with me at larry@wildworldofhistory.com. Now, as always, I am working from the 15th anniversary edition of Patriots History of the United States. However, today we're going to catch up. I apparently missed the prompts, but we're going to catch up on 2 different documents, actually 3 different documents from the Patriots History Reader. We'll try to do one per session. I don't know how long the other 2 are just yet, but we're going to do Booker T. Washington's Atlanta Compromise speech in 1895 from the Patriots History Reader. And we're now in chapter 13. So that's where this really applies. Booker T. Washington was a Negro or Black educator and leader of the Tuskegee Institute in Alabama, who by 1890 had become highly regarded as an administrator and spokesman for educated Blacks. In 1893, he spoke at the Christian Workers Meeting in Atlanta, and his reception there prompted the governor of Georgia, Rufus Bullock, to invite him to speak at the opening of the Cotton States and International Exposition in Atlanta on September 18th, 1895. Surpassing all expectations, he delivered a resounding speech to a predominantly white audience and was greeted by thundering applause and a standing ovation. He called for shared responsibility between blacks and whites and stressed education and the employment of the Protestant work ethic. He did not blame whites for slavery or black problems, and that was the key to his acceptance. Rather than looking backward, he asked everyone to start from where they were and move forward. His Atlanta Compromise address, as it came to be called, was widely hailed as one of the most important and influential speeches in American history, and the editor of the Atlanta Constitution even took the speaker's stand to proclaim the speech as the beginning of a moral revolution in America. With this speech, Washington became the foremost Black leader in the nation and held that position until his death in 1915. The reader should ask himself why Washington is almost forgotten today. Is this because schools fail to teach history, people have short memories, or because his style was cooperative rather than confrontational? He sought to improve the education and training of African Americans to prepare them for the day when they could be full partners with whites politically and economically. Reconstruction had failed to establish equality between the races, so Washington chose to earn equality like the Catholic Irish and other persecuted peoples before him. Would a confrontational approach at the time have achieved results faster or simply alienated whites and have been counterproductive? Marcus Garvey's alternative, return to Africa movement, was hardly successful, but would it have been a better long-term solution? What would Martin Luther King Jr. have done in Washington's stead? So let's start the speech, the 1895 Atlanta Compromise speech. Mr. President and gentlemen of the Board of Directors and citizens, 1/3 of the population of the South is of the Negro race. No enterprise seeking the material, civil, or moral welfare of this section can disregard this element of our population and reach the highest success. But I try to convey to you, Mr. President, directors, the sentiment of the masses of my race when I say that in no way had the value and manhood of the American Negro been more fittingly and generously recognized than by managers of this magnificent exposition at every stage of its progress. It is a recognition that will do more to cement the friendship of the two races than any occurrence since the dawn of our freedom. Not only this, but the opportunity here afforded will awaken among us a new era of industrial progress. Ignorant and inexperienced, it is not strange that in the first years of our new life we began at the top instead of at the bottom, that a seat in Congress or the state legislature was more sought than real estate or industrial skill, that the political convention or stump speaking had more attractions than starting a dairy farm or a truck garden. A ship lost at sea for many days suddenly sighted a friendly vessel. From the mast of that unfortunate vessel was seen a signal, "Water, water, we die of thirst." The answer from the friendly vessel came back, "Cast down your bucket where you are." A second time the signal, "Water, water, send us water," ran up from the distressed vessel and was answered, "Cast down your bucket where you are." And a third and fourth signal for water was answered, "Cast down your bucket where you are." The captain of the distressed vessel, at last heeding the injunction, cast down his bucket and came up full of fresh, sparkling water from the mouth of the Amazon River. To those of my race who depend on bettering their condition in a foreign land, or who underestimate the importance of cultivating friendly relations with the Southern white man, who is their next door neighbor, I would say, cast down your bucket where you are. Cast it down, making friends in every manly way of the people of all races by whom we are surrounded. Cast it down in agriculture, mechanics, and commerce, and domestic service, and in the professions. And in the connection, it is so well to bear in mind that whatever other sins the South may be called to bear, when it comes to business, pure and simple, it is the South that the Negro is given a man's chance, and in the commercial world, and in nothing in this exposition more eloquent than in emphasizing this chance. Our greatest danger is that the great leap from slavery to freedom may overlook the fact that the masses of us are to live by the production of our own hands and fail to keep in mind that we shall prosper in proportion as we learn to dignify and glorify common labor and put brains and skill into the common occupations of life, shall prosper in proportion as we learn to draw the line between superficial and substantial, the ornamental gewgaws of life and the useful. No race can prosper till it learns that there must be much dignity in tilling a field as in writing a poem. It is at the bottom of this life we must begin and not at the top. Nor should we permit our grievances to overshadow our opportunities. To those of the white race who look at the incoming of those of foreign birth and strange tongue and habits for the prosperity of the South, were I permitted to repeat what I say to my own race, cast down your bucket where you are. Cast it down among the 8 millions of Negroes whose habits you know, whose fidelity and love you have tested in the days when to have proved treacherous meant the ruin of your firesides. Cast down your bucket among these people who have, without the strikes and labor wars, tilled your fields, cleared your forests, built your railroads and cities, and brought forth treasures from the bowels of the earth, and help make possible this magnificent representation of the progress of the South. Cast down your bucket among my people, helping and encouraging them as you are doing on these grounds, and to educate and to education of head, hand, and heart, you will find that they will buy your surplus land, make blossom the waste spaces in your fields, and run your factories. While doing this, you can be sure in the future, as in the past, that you and your families will be surrounded by the most patient, faithful, and law-abiding and unresentful people that the world has seen. As we have proved our loyalty to you in the past in nursing your children, watching the sick bed of your mothers and fathers, and often following them with tear-dimmed eyes to their graves, so in the future, in our humble way, we shall stand by you with a devotion that no foreigner can approach, ready to lay down our lives if need be in defense of yours, interlacing our industrial, commercial, civil, and religious life with yours in a way that shall make the interests of both races one. In all things that are purely social, we can be as separate as the fingers, yet one as the hand in all things essential to mutual progress. There is no defense or security for any of us except in the highest intelligence and development of all. If anywhere there are efforts tending to curtail the fullest growth of the Negro, let those efforts be turned into stimulating, encouraging, and making him the most useful and intelligent citizen. Effort or means so invested will pay 1,000% interest. These efforts will be twice blessed, blessing him that gives and him that takes. There is no escape through law of man or God from the inevitable, namely, the laws of changeless justice bind oppressor with oppressed, and close as sin and suffering joined, we march to fate abreast. Nearly 16 millions of hands will aid you in pulling the load upward as they will pull against you the load downward. We have constituted 1/3 and more of the ignorance and crime in the South, or 1/3 of its intelligence and progress. We shall contribute 1/3 to the business and industrial prosperity of the South, or we shall prove a veritable body of death, stagnating, depressing, retarding every effort to advance that body politic. I mean, basically, Washington is saying, you got two choices here. You can either join us and we can all help each other and work together, or we can oppose you and it's going to be hell. Gentlemen of the exposition, we present you our humble effort at an exhibition of our progress. You must not expect overmuch. Starting 30 years ago with ownership here in a few quilts and pumpkins and chickens gathered from miscellaneous sources, remember the path that has led them to these interventions and production of agricultural implements, buggies, steam engines, newspapers, books, statuary, carving, paintings, and the management of drugstores and banks has not been trodden without contact with thorns and thistles. While we take pride in what we exhibit as a result of our independent efforts, we do not for a moment forget that our part in this exhibition would fall short of your expectations, but for the constant help that has come to our educational life, not only from southern states, but especially from northern philanthropists who have made their gifts a constant stream of blessing and encouragement. So he's saying we appreciate what's been done for us, unlike today, where there's no appreciation whatsoever. In fact, the only thing that is said today is that everything is the fault of white racism. It's absurd, ridiculous, and downright stupid. The wisest among my race understand the agitation of questions of social equality is the most extreme folly, and that progress in the enjoyment of all the privileges that will come to us must be the result of severe and constant struggle rather than of artificial forcing. Amen, bro. That's the way anybody gets anything. Anytime you artificially force things together, they will come apart naturally. Anytime you naturally put things together, they can't come apart artificially. No race that has anything to do with to contribute to the markets of the world is long in any degree ostracized. It is important and right that all privileges of law be ours, but it is vastly more important that we be prepared for the exercise of these privileges. The opportunity to earn $1 in a factory just now is worth infinitely more than the opportunity to spend $1 in an opera house. Man, that's so good. When you think of what the Ivy League schools have done in terms of going out of their way to siphon off whatever percent of Black and Hispanic students they want to have there at the expense of every other university in the country. Walter Williams and Thomas Sowell have written about this a great deal. Many Blacks were artificially injected into Harvard, who had no business being at Harvard, but who had a great deal of business being at Virginia Tech or the University of Michigan or Arizona State University, and would have thrived there. Meanwhile, other Blacks now who are not capable of thriving in those places were forced into those ranks. It's a stupid and shall I say evil development. The opportunity to earn $1 in a factory just now is worth infinitely more than the opportunity to spend $1 in an opera house. In conclusion, may I repeat that nothing in 30 years has given us more hope and encouragement and drawn us so near to you of the white race as this opportunity offered by the exposition and here bending, as it were, over the altar that represents the results of the struggles of your race and mine, both starting practically empty-handed 3 decades ago. I pledge that in your effort to work out the great and intricate problem which God has laid at the doors of the South, you shall have at all times the patient, sympathetic help of my race. Only let this be continually in mind. While from representations in these buildings of the product of the field, of forest, of mine, of factory, letters, art, goodwill, yet far above and beyond material benefits will be the higher good that, let us pray God, will come in a blotting out of sectional differences and racial animosities and suspicions, in a determination to administer absolute justice in a willing obedience among all classes to the mandates of the law. This, coupled with our material prosperity, will bring into our beloved South a new heaven and a new earth. Now, I agree with almost all of that. The only thing to be wary of is that it was the Whigs who continually argued that economic progress alone would end the slavery issue, that slavery would just go away if we have roads and banks and internal improvements. Remember that? And that doesn't happen. Mere physical and material elevation alone does not solve the spiritual problem. Or I should add the legal one. You have to have all of them. And as we're going to see in our next reading, part of the problem was the law was not keeping up with the reality of growing equality of the races economically and in other ways. So what we're going to do next time, and let me see, it's a long one. Yeah. Okay, next time we're going to read the legal case Plessy v. Ferguson of 1896. The reason this is so important is without this case, Plessy Ferguson, there is no need for Brown versus the Board of Education and all the problems that it caused in terms of forced busing, racial animosity, cities coming apart, and so on, and so on, and so on. So what we find consistently in American history is that any wrong attempt to solve a problem eventually is going to be paid for by another better approach, but both of them always leave scars that can't be undone. They leave scars that are going to last for a very long time. So keep that in mind. I would urge you for further reading to look at my old friend Walter Williams. He's deceased now. Walter Williams was a professor of economics at George Mason University, and he wrote a wonderful little book. I think it was his doctoral dissertation called The State Against Blacks. And one of the main foci of Walter's book was that government in a myriad of ways discriminates against other races through licensing and regulation. For example, one of the examples he gave was in the form of all these requirements to cut hair, to be barbers and hairdressers. And as you know, in the African American community, they take great pride in braiding and cornrows and many of these other hairstyles that require great skill in order to do, but they aren't the skills that the state elevates. No, it wants you to have certain university degrees and classes in chemistry and so on and so forth. And they would say it's for safety, but it's never for safety. It almost always is for purposes of discrimination. Think about this. The cab structure in major metropolitan areas was based on tokens. These gold medallions, they weren't pure gold, I don't think. Maybe they were, I don't know, I never had one. But these golden medallions had to be purchased for a great deal of money. Now, back when I was studying this and Walter Williams was looking into it, it was thousands and thousands of dollars, something like $10,000 to $20,000. I'm sure if the system were in place today, it would be close to $50,000 to $100,000. meaning no immigrant, no poor black, no person off the boat would have a hope in Hades of ever getting one of these medallions. So who did it protect? It protected those who already had the medallions when the medallion system came into place. And while the company had problems and the owner was something of a diddle pickle, I'm watching my language here, Uber killed that. Uber ended up offering jobs to anyone who would be a good driver and was willing to work hard. And then Lyft came along and offered necessary competition to Uber. So Williams's book is a very good insight into the ways that states, city governments, various entrenched organizations use their power of licensing to keep minorities at bay, and how we'd be so much better off without a lot of this licensing. Now, Robert Barnes, one of my favorite lawyers, argues that this ought to be true of the bar, that you shouldn't have to pass a bar exam in order to be a lawyer. Abraham Lincoln was one of the best lawyers in America. He never passed a bar. So Barnes argues that the bar exams are developed and designed by people who are trying to keep certain other people out. It's very much like what some of you are going to go through with the advanced placement test. The advanced placement test does not measure your knowledge of history or your understanding of history. It measures those variables that those who design the test want to use to keep undesirable people out of the system, i.e., usually conservative people. So consider that. Thomas Sowell has also written a couple of very good books I would recommend to you. And while at first you may not think these are really applicable, they are. One is called The Economics and Politics of Race. And in it, Sowell looks at race around the world and how different ethnic groups inevitably dominate certain businesses and certain types of economic enterprises. For example, in Malaya, the Chinese, the traditional Chinese occupied all of the higher value positions. In parts of Latin America, Lebanese, hardly from Portugal or Spain, right? But the Lebanese dominated many parts of the businesses. Here in America, at least until recently, I don't know what's happened with California recently, because honestly, California's swirling the bowl there, and without major intervention, it's going to be a problem in the coming years. But up into the 1990s, 90% of the nail, fingernail and foot business were done by Vietnamese. In Georgia, up until the 1990s, which is the statistic that Sowell cited, a heavy proportion of all the grocery businesses in Georgia were from Lebanese. You can find these pockets of people everywhere who excel at these certain types of occupations, and no amount of legislation can open that up or change it. So that's a good book to look at, The Economics and Politics of Race. Finally, look at Sowell's other book on this called Ethnic America. It's truly an astounding book in terms of just laying open how open American society has been and how many different ethnic groups came in, and most importantly, how they took very different approaches to getting ahead. For example, as he pointed out, the Irish, who came with a great suspicion of government and history of government oppression by the British government, almost immediately sought to elevate themselves by getting positions in government. And so they would flesh out the entire police force of Boston and other major cities, New York, the fire departments, and even to this day, if you look at the names of those memorialized on 9/11, the firefighters who died when those towers came down, you're going to find a huge disproportionate number of Irish names in all that. So take a look at those books, The Economics and Politics of Race by Soule, Ethnic America by Soule, and The State Against Blacks by Walter Williams. And I'll see you guys back here next time. Oh, don't forget to buy Larry a coffee. We're going to make this into a movie, doggone it. I need your help. Buy me a coffee. If every person who watched this video bought me a coffee, we'd be pretty close to there. I'll see you later.